Any questions? Any questions across the room? It usually takes one person to kind of start the ball rolling. Who's going to be that brave first question asked asker? Right here.
In the panel, do you guys encourage or discourage, or you're sort of neutral to being a part of multiple things? So music and children's and this and that.
As a pastor, if that was the requirement, then I'd have no one to help me with anything. In every church, no matter how small or how large, percentages pretty much going to be the same. 20% of the people's doing 80% of the work. And so if you are involved in other things, that's fantastic, but it can lead to burnout. And so it's really important that you identify your talents and identify your burden, not just based it off of your needs or what other people in your family or friends are doing, your circles are doing, but really identify your talents. I believe in putting people in any place where they're gifted, not basically, specifically, just because there's a need there. I'd rather have somebody that is there, that wants to be there, that is gifted doing the thing, than just having a body there, right? So if you're involved in other things, that's fantastic. Kudos to you. But yeah, it's not that I encourage it or discourage it. It's just the reality of our churches. It's awesome that you're involved. That's fantastic. I'm sure your pastor's grateful. But don't feel like you have to be completely sold out in any one department and you're failing in other areas. Everybody in the panel is going to probably have their own opinion. My opinion is just do what you can do in the kingdom of God, and we're happy to have you.
One thing I'll say is communicate to each part, either be it choir or wherever you're at, or if it's Sunday school, when you're not going to be available and when you are, so that you're not unavailable. And they don't know.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that? Okay. Any other follow-up on that? Okay, any other questions?
For anyone who wants to tell their story, why did you get involved in Sunday school?
Why did you get involved in Sunday school? I'll start the ball rolling. I started because there was a guy in our church, his name was Scott Blair, and he made Sunday school look so fun that I promised I didn't know much about it, and I thought I want to be involved in it. He wore outlandish outfits, size 20-something shoes. He actually probably had a 10. He would wear the goofy hat. His class was popping. He had music playing. The kids loved it. And I remember walking past that over and over again thinking, I wish I could be involved in that. And then finally I just said, I'm doing it. And so I joined in with Sunday school back in, oh goodness, 25 years ago, and you're here ever since. So it has a hook that it bears in you. You just got to start somewhere.
Mine kind of ties into the other question. I wear a lot of hats at our church, do a lot of different things. And so our pastor, before he was the pastor, kind of revolutionized our Sunday school and changed how we do kind of more one-room Sunday school. And he got it up and going and then said, hey, take it over. And so I didn't have a clue what I was doing, and kind of like what Booker said, the rest is history. Got inspired by people like Brother Booker, Brother Hodge. So.
My mom, like I referenced in last class, my mom was Sunday school guru in Fresno, and watching that grow. I actually didn't teach while I was in Fresno. I was on bus. In Fresno, they don't really do bus and Sunday school at the same time. It's really one or the other. So I did bus. When I moved to Rialto, there was a need for the toddler class, which was way out of my zone. But I stepped in there and I started doing that transition to the bigger class. But just what I wanted to point out just real quick is parents that are Sunday school teachers, now that I have kids, hearing my kids say, what do you want to do when you grow up? When they were really little, I want to be a Sunday school teacher. And so it's awesome to make it a generational thing. My girls are in class with me. And it's amazing.
So mine actually might be different from most of us here. My burden actually came later after I started. So this is my wife, Angel, and she actually converted or flirted to convert. That's a joke. But on a serious note, I got involved in kids ministry because she was involved. But my burden came later. So that might happen to many, many people. God knew what He was doing. And I praying and with leadership and decided, I think this is the one. And we were dating at the time. And she was heavily involved in kids ministry. So I said, well, I'll help. And then I started helping, and then before I knew it, God said, hey, this is what you're going to do. And I took that step. And then there's been a few things that happened throughout my life that really drove that burden even deeper. But starting and the burden came at 2 different points.
I'm in children's ministry because I'm a child.
I have 2 reasons. One was I wasn't raised in Pentecost. I was raised in a Catholic church, and I went to church. But something happened to me as a young teenager that I knew something was happening in my life, and I just didn't know what it was. So when I started coming to church at 22 years old, when you're 10 years old, you want to be 12. When you're 12, you want to be 13. When you're 13, you want to be 16. 16, you want to be, 18. 18, you want to be 21. You're 21, you go, oh, I don't want to be 25. And whenever you're 22, it's like that's where I was. I was in the military, and I had 3 kids. I had 1 kid. She was right here. And I thought, wow, I can do something about this. I can get my life straight. And I learned the truth. And those who have learned something, and especially the truth, and this truth, it's your responsibility to teach others. When I didn't want to grow up, I wanted my children to grow up not knowing God. So I felt it was my responsibility to teach. Then I fell in love with the kids, and then I fell in love with teaching. And then I fell in love with the idea of, this is a generational, generational. I want my kids to one day take my place as a Sunday school teacher, or a lead teacher, or one who travels and teaches this. And I sit here today, and that dream is coming.
I don't want to be the last one. Jordan, you can be the last one. Since we're all doing this. I had a Sunday school teacher who impacted my life at a very, very critical moment in my life. And I remember sitting there thinking if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't be where I am. And so when I exited the system of, Sunday school, you age out. We didn't have a teen class, so between the ages of 12 and 16, I was just desperate to be back in Sunday school. And when I turned 16, I begged them. So I became the first and the youngest teacher to enter into our Sunday school teachers training. So I've been in Sunday school for a long time. So I didn't think I was going to stay in it. I was at a general conference, and we had a friend who was trying to introduce me to all these different children's evangelists. And I said, stop trying to introduce me to all these people. I'm not going to be in children's ministry the rest of my life. And he said, I give it 10 years. It's been 20. And here I am today, and I absolutely love it. I love being able to give back, and hopefully I can make an impact on the job site that they desire to be a Sunday school teacher and impact another job site.
Yeah, for Sunday school ministry, children's ministry, my parents, growing up in Fresno, my parents were bus ministry, Sunday school, that was their thing, and you just grow a love for it, and it becomes a part of your life and what they're doing. It just becomes who you are. And so, I want that for my kids. I have 5 kids. You guys, it's crazy, but that's where we have our own Sunday school at home. My wife's a teacher. But the cool thing is I could probably be involved in a bunch of different things, but being involved in bus ministry, being involved in Sunday school, I get to do that with my family.
And if I was up there singing or up there doing something, nothing against those things, I don't get to do that with my family. And that's a big thing for me, so.
Awesome. Any other questions? There's one over here. Oh, there's one right back there too?
What do you think about youth participating and helping in like the junior class or the super class?
I love it. I think it's awesome. Can't start too young as far as I'm concerned. Now in our church, we do have a limit of 16 years old before you can be involved, and then it's as a teacher trainee, so you can only be in there a certain number of times a month. 14? Okay, well, I'm a little off my ages. Anyway, but starting young is not a bad thing at all. They may not have the same experience as someone who's been doing it forever, but they can start somewhere. And so we want them involved. So yeah, I'm all about it. Get involved if that's what you're asking.
At 14 to 16, you could come in once a month. They train and do a monthly training. They rotate the 14 and 15 year olds. Then once you're 16, then you can be a
Anybody else want to weigh in on that?
Ultimately, whatever your pastor just sets the policy as well. So we'll respect.
All right, I saw another question over here, Sister Glenn.
We didn't discuss this in any of the sessions, but I was hoping that I can learn from any of your experience. How do you have Sunday school that accommodates the needs of special needs children?
So obviously, to a certain extent, you can't do this perfectly, but I would say try at your absolute best to just treat them like every other kid. Love them with all your heart. Now obviously there's certain things they might not be able to get involved the same way as other kids, but we have someone in our church, Fabian, and he's got all kinds of issues because of his mother being into things while he was born, but we really put him in that limelight, and he's wanting to be a preacher and a pastor and all that stuff, but we involve him in everything just like all the other kids, and we don't give him any special perks or anything. We just treat him like any of the other kids and love him, and he jumps right in and loves it.
Yeah, we had one that was very sensory, got really overloaded a lot of times. So the parent typically knows like what they can handle. So we just encourage them. If anything, just bring them in. They don't like loud noises. Well, then maybe we should bring them in during worship, but try to bring them in during this time. And so she would eventually just keep bringing him during those times. And then he'd say, well, the kids are going, I want to go. Are you sure you want to go? So he started developing, he wanted to be there. And so the sensory around him started not bugging him as much. So I really feel like that may be a God thing too. But he wanted to be there, but just giving him a little bit, he still felt like he was involved in the children's ministry without being overloaded with the whole entire service.
We have a big family that we pick up, and the two younger ones are very special needs to the point where they cannot be in the class with the others. If we try to treat them like everybody else, we tried, and it just was not working. So we ended up making a very small class, a class of 2, and there was 2 people that they would try to teach them, they would teach them, or they would teach it on their level for those 2 kids. It would be in a room with just those 2 kids and those teachers. And it was a very adaptive process. It was didn't look even close to what the other class looked like, but it was something that the kids could still benefit from. They still knew they were loved, and they would still get teaching, and they would still, come away with something. It wasn't the same experience that the other kids were having, but it was what we could give them, and it worked for while they came. And so we can do something like that.
We've never had kids with that extreme of disabilities, or special needs, but we've had kids whose parents were really concerned about sending them because of their special needs or what have you. And sometimes I feel like we can be intimidated by that. But one thing that I've noticed, we had a young boy in our our church who all the other kids could sense that there was something different. And they would give him so much grace. They would not tease him. They would not bully him. They would be so graceful and patient with him. And in a sense, he almost became kind of a mascot. Like, you know what I mean? And so that thing that everyone else would say, oh, that's going to cause a barrier for him to be involved, actually was the very thing that they embraced, and he found his place. And so I would say never be afraid to embrace them and bring them into that circle and try. And if you can make special exceptions, then great. But a lot of times it's just our insecurity dealing with them, and maybe the parents' our intimidation dealing with them, the parents' insecurities about how they handle my kid, or what's going to happen to my kid. A lot of times we're not giving our own kids in the classroom or our children's church the benefit of the doubt, how they're going to embrace it and react to it as well.
One time when man said to me, if Jesus was so good, why didn't he take my child? And I said, what do you mean by that? He says, well, there's people in Africa, there's people here, there's people there, dying without the name of Jesus. I said, does that bother you? And he said, yeah, it does. I said, well, I think maybe you called. Sister, there's nobody doing that in this church or in this conference. I think God's calling you to that ministry. You need to find the answer. And who knows, maybe next year you can teach us.
Any other questions?
More of a children's service together. I'm not sure if that's correct or not. But if you do, you only have a certain amount of facilities or a certain amount of time. What are the age ranges for your classrooms, and especially in a children's church? Where's the cutoff? And then what groups do you like to move together? So I know it's typical for like 5-year-olds to be with 18-year-olds or 15-year-olds. So I just want to know the age ranges.
We do 5 through 11, and then we do have a couple younger classes that I can't remember exact ages, but we have a toddler class and a nursery essentially. But the one that I'm involved in is ages 5 through 11.
We have a toddler class, a kinder class, which would be one of the things, we have kindergarten class, and then 6 to 11. That's what we do. But what I've learned is, and people can be different on this, I've learned not to be so policy driven as far as the ages of when they go into the next class. Really, there's going to be certain kids that are more mature. There's going to be certain kids that aren't as mature or not ready. And so kind of in that age group, from kinder to kids church, we kind of have a little bit of a dimmer, and we'll try it. See if they can be engaged, see if they're going to be able to connect in kids church. And if not, we'll just bring them back into the kinder class until they're ready. And vice versa. Maybe they'll go to kids church and or they're in the kinder class and they're not quite at that age range, but they're checking out because they're really mature. They went to kindergarten early, or whatever, and they're way out of whatever everybody else in the class is doing. We'll try on kids church, see if it works for them, And so that's my 2 cents on that.
We have the top of the class up to 5, and then we have up to 4, and then we have our 5 to 11. It sounds like that's what most people roughly are doing. It does seem to be when they turn 12, their personalities change enough where they don't fit in as well. On a rough average. And they're too cool to do the action songs, they're too cool for some of the stuff, and they just don't fit in as well. So that seems to be a good break.
The same thing he was talking about on the 5 to like kindergarten. Some of our 11-year-old bus boys, they were way too mature, and so they're actually starting to go into teen class because they just sat in the back and be in trouble. They were too cool.
So for the Rock Church, I'm going to refer you to my brain here. She does the age. We don't actually do by ages so much. We do some of them by grades, not by ages. for the same reason that Tyler was just talking about, is sometimes kids mature faster than other kids, and so we'll have them in different classes. But also to touch on the 10, 11, and 12-year-olds, because sometimes you get 10-year-olds that think they're too cool also. We actually have a totally different thing called Extreme Team, where we take that age group with that class, because it's actually it's probably the biggest class we have. We take that age group separately, and we go over the lesson with them, and we involve them in it, in the actual teaching of all the classrooms and the object lessons and the action songs, because that makes them feel like they're a part. And then now all of a sudden, they're not too cool because they're teaching, so now they kind of feel like the burden is on them also, and that gets them more involved, but she can go over the age groups.
We have nursery, and then we have 2-year-olds, and then there's 3 and 4-year-olds, and then kinders, and then we do 1st and 2nd, 3rd and 4th, 5th and 6th, and then we just started a teen class, but it's the same thing that they were saying, is sometimes they're 2 years old and they are ready to do the 3 years old. We used to do kids church from 6 to 12, or from that 1st to 6th grade, but the last 2 years we've had really mature kinders, and so they just wanted to come to kids church, just because we're so cool. It's too much fun, so the kinders want to join us, and they've done really, really well. So I think it just kind of depends on the teacher, if they want to throw them in their kids church when they're 5, but if they're very young kinder, then definitely keep them back or move them around, depending on their age.
One thing we do too is every 8th week we do a Holy Ghost rally, where we have from the youngest class, the toddlers, all the way up to our teen class in a single room, and we just have church. And we do some fun kiddie intro stuff, but then we just have a preacher and they just preach. And it's amazing how from the oldest to the youngest, they're in the altar praying together, crying. So it's not like you can't reach the whole spectrum at once. Now, I wouldn't do it every Sunday, never. But once every 8 weeks, it does work. So you can occasionally reach them all.
And sometimes we do, if we know it's going to be a really intense service, we just let the teachers know in the kinders, and sometimes they'll prepare to take them out. And they'll take them out after all of the fun action songs, and then they'll take them into their class and do a little, lesson, and then let them take a little breather and before they leave. It just depends on how that teacher feels going on.
Just one little caveat too, is probably went through this in other classes, but we've learned that if you teach at the level of the oldest student in the room, they won't be bored. If you teach at the lowest level, the 12-year-old's going to be bored. So teach. If you can get your level of understanding and your focus is on those 12-year-olds in the back room, everybody else up front is just, they'll get it. But the ones, if you focus in on the back, preach to the most mature person of your students, and that's your target.
All right, any other questions? Anybody else? If there's not, that's okay too. All right, going once, going twice. All right, let's give our session teachers a big hand.